welcome to our show today. I have an exciting guest, Emily Connor Cooper. Hi, Emily. How you doing?
Hi, I'm fine. It's great to be here with you today, Suzy.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So tell me what's going on in your life. There's so many things.
Well, there's a lot going on here in Vegas right now. I have some things going on in New York also, but I will just kind of start out by telling you a little bit about myself because a lot of people don't know. I'm originally from Texas. I was born in Texas in May 20th, 1970. I was born in Baytown, and that's where it all began. And I was born and raised for a short time in a rice farming town.
Rice farming?
Yes. My grandfather was a rice farmer. My father was a politician and a realtor, but my mother had retired basically at that point from show business.
So your mother was in show business too?
My mother was from Dallas originally. So when she left show business, she moved back to Dallas. My mother was one of the original Serendipity singers from the 60s.
Wow.
So she lived in New York, and I think she'd gone to the University of Texas. She was very talented, but became pretty famous early on. She and her duo partner, Tom Tiemann, actually ended up with a William Morris agent at like 20 years old.
Wow.
As Tommy and Diane. And they, I believe, were like right under Sonny and Cher. They were touring in Canada.
Wow.
Yeah. And right. And she became very, busy and early on. So at one point, their agents put them with the Newport singers from the University of Colorado, and they became the Serendipity singers. They all moved to New York. They were based out of the Bitter End, which was owned by Fred Weintraub, who was their manager.
Wow.
But I think by a certain point, after they had about 5 years, she was burned out because they were touring so much. So she ended up just moving back to Texas, and she met my father in Dallas, and that's where it kind of all began for me. I didn't grow up in a show business world, but they did do, the Serendipity Singers did actually quite a few reunion concerts over the years with Gerald Ford in Vail, where Bob Hope was there, and then they did a big one in Branson, Missouri. So I got to see them actually perform. I remember the Platters Open, that was in '99.
Wow.
And then they've done PBS specials and so forth. But I grew up in Texas, and I had an interesting childhood because my parents got divorced when I was 7.
Oh.
And so we moved to Florida. She took us to Florida, and I wanted to go back to Texas. So it was a bit much. And then after graduating from high school in Texas, I decided I wanted to go back to Florida, which was a terrible idea. I had some fun there. And then I finally just said, you know what? I'm moving to New York. I'm getting out of here. Because my mother had always told me exciting stories about New York and show business. And I just knew that I wanted something exciting. So I'd gone to the University of Florida, and I was not happy there. So I ended up in New York. I actually applied to go to school at NYU. I got accepted, and I ended up graduating with honors from NYU, and I loved it. And I went to work at NBC because my degree was, I think, media studies, and it was great. It was very interesting, and I thought I was really going to be a segment producer. And then I realized there wasn't a lot of money in that. If you're not on air, at NBC, you're really, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because they don't, they're all, they don't have insurance. They're all freelancers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was really, I said, you know what, maybe I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. So I decided at that time, I graduated from NYU, and I said, I'm going to go to work for private equity in Wall Street, because that's where the money is. And I'd gotten a paralegal degree down in Miami, which was a really good one, because I knew that down there, while I was with my mother living down there, that I could get a good job in New York doing that. So I ended up graduating from NYU. I worked for NBC for a short time, and then I said, I'm going to go to work for, I don't know, wherever I can get a job at as a paralegal, which I did. So then I said, I'm going to work on my show business with maybe theater and Broadway. And I met a man named Roy Miller, who was a great friend. We lost Roy in 2012, I believe.
I'm sorry.
And he was very young. He was 52 years old. Yeah, he was 10 years older than I was. But he was my mentor. And I started working on West Side Story with him. And he was training me to be a Broadway producer, which is not easy. I mean, the main part and the hardest part.
What a life.
Yeah. No.
How old were you when this?
I was in my early 30s at that point. And so Roy said, this is a very stressful thing to do with Broadway, because the main thing you have to do is get money out of people,
Right.
And I wasn't really bad at it, but the problem was once we got the money, you had to have a good show. Because the worst thing in the world is having to losing your investors' money.
Right.
It was
Absolutely.
brutal. And but I finally I got a show. Going back to actually my Texas roots, my father had been very involved in politics, and he went to school. Actually, his college roommate was Mark White, who was the governor of Texas at one point, and during that time, Ann Richards was the state treasurer.
Right.
So one day, my father, it was in '87, I was a junior in high school, he said, Emily, tell your teachers that you're going to miss school on Thursday because we're going to go campaigning for Mark White. So I said, okay, Dad, but I'm going to miss this. I'm going to miss this test, or I'm going to miss. He said, just look, we're taking a tape recorder. We're going to, interview the governor in the car. And he said, oh, and by the way, there's going to be an interesting woman with us. Her name is Ann Richards. She was the state treasurer.
Yeah.
So that day, I ended up spending the whole day in the back seat of the car with Ann Richards.
Wow.
And you talk about a crash course. I mean, and she had been a teacher, and she was
You've had a hell of a life.
yeah, right. So this is, so of course I'm all nervous about missing school, but I got my recording, of my interview with Mark White in the front seat. Meanwhile, Ann is, sitting in the back talking to me like, well, so Emily, what do you want to do? But I spent the whole afternoon because we were driving around East Texas, our county. Yeah. So then fast forward back, so to New York.
Yeah.
In about 2012, it was a little bit sooner than that. One of my really good friends, Sandra Castellanos, who's from Texas, she was very close to Ann. She worked with Ann in Texas, and then when Ann moved to New York, she worked for her there also, and I got to know them there. But Sandra said, Holland Taylor, the actress, is writing a play about Ann, and I'm very involved, and Holland is really into this.
Wow.
So I ended up being a producer on that show, which meant a lot to me because I did know Ann, and she was wonderful. I mean, she was a mentor, and she was such an interesting lady, and so that was my first show there. And then I worked on some other shows on the town. Cagney was an off-Broadway show I worked on. I was very involved with Jazz at Lincoln Center in New York. And then we also actually had done when Ann Richards wrote a book, I hosted a book party for her with another group of people. And it was August, I remember, of 2003. And she said, well, if you want to do this party for me, that's fine. But just as long as all I have to do is show up, and she did, and we had a great time. We all had name badges on, of where we were from. We tried to find all the Texans in New York that we could. And we would
Did you find quite a few?
Oh, yes. And, unfortunately, Liz Smith, who was her really good friend, Liz was out of town. People were out of town, but boy, was it a fun party. And she had a great time. So that
Sounds fabulous.
So that was great. So that was a lot of my New York experience. But what I was doing was I was working on Broadway theater shows, but also working in private equity and
You were
on Wall
busy
Street.
from morning till night then.
Yeah.
Constantly. Wow.
I did a lot, but I got to a point where it was New York was really just too much after 21 years. But so there was a day in 2010 when I was dating a comedian who was a member of the Friars Club who said, I want you to come with me to a book party for Pat Cooper. And I said, who's Pat Cooper? and
now we're getting down to it. How did she meet Pat Cooper?
Yeah. So I said, okay, that's cool. Because I used to go to the Friars Club, and I was never a member, but I didn't need to be because all my friends were members, and it was a great place, and it was fun. Similar to the Italian American Club here, that same kind of warm vibe and fun thing. But so we go to the book party of Pat Cooper, and I was like, oh my God, now this guy, he's really something. Because he was interesting. And I had grown up in Texas being around big personalities. Charlie Wilson, from Charlie Wilson's War, the movie.
Yeah, I loved that movie.
Charlie Wilson was my congressman from the time I was like 3 years old until 1997, which was the year I moved to New York.
Yeah.
But those were real, and Ann Richards. And
they're real people.
They're real people. But I grew up around these people thinking everybody's like that,
Yeah.
So Pat Cooper was one of those big personalities. When I met him, I was like, oh my God, this guy. So this was 2010, and I had stayed friends with him for a long time, and he actually coincidentally lived around the corner from me on 70th Street, which was a weird coincidence, But even weirder was 180 West End Avenue, where I lived at the time. He and his wife, Patty, had lived in that building and moved out in 1970, the year that I was born.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So that was just a funny coincidence. But when I became, in about 2015, I was single, and I knew I wanted to leave New York because I was just tired.
Yeah.
And I wanted to move out, to the West. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to be where the weather was nice. I wasn't ready to move back to Texas.
Right.
But Pat and I got to be close friends, and I was like, oh, this guy is so great. Because we had gone out to dinner with other friends, and my mother would come into town, and we'd bring her, and they would talk about people they had a lot in common because they were in the same era of show business together.
Yeah.
So they would talk about, like Jack Jones and his father Alan, and they would kind of gossip about the old time show business, which was funny. So it was fun. And my mother was just always like, oh God, Pat, he's such a handful. Now back then, Pat was, his hearing, he actually, he retired in 2013, I believe, right around there, because he started getting tinnitus, which is actually pronounced properly tinnitus, but nobody.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was tinnitus.
Yeah, tinnitus is so he said, you know what, I'm done. And but his hearing aids weren't really great. So it was kind of hard when we'd go out to dinner. He would be kind of difficult to talk to. He would take over because he couldn't hear. You couldn't really banter with him because, it was frustrating, but he handled it very well.
Yeah.
So anyway, we lived around the corner from each other, but we would go out when I became single, just because he was fun.
Yeah.
The guy was really fun.
Yeah. He captures your attention, doesn't he? Can you hold that thought?
Sure.
We'll be right back.
Welcome to Diamond Travel, your getaway to unparalleled luxury cruises and unforgettable safari experiences.
Hi, I'm Suzy Saline Lipsky, founder of Diamond Travel. At Diamond Travel, we redefine luxury travel with curated experiences tailored just for you.
Dive into a world of sophistication with our luxury cruises, setting the bar for elegance and top-notch service. Sail through the crystal clear waters and let us redefine your notion of opulent relaxation. For those seeking adventure, our tailor-made safaris promise an immersive experience like no other.
Call today while there's still space available. Reservations are filling up fast for this fun-filled experience at sea. Dial 702-778-5037 now and let the waves carry you to a world of unmatched wonder. Bon voyage! And we're back with Emily Connor Cooper. Oh my goodness, this is an awesome show.
Well, thanks. I'm not normally good at talking about myself.
But I'm loving it.
Okay.
Keep going.
Well, I will tell you, there was an interesting point where, I knew I wanted to leave New York, and Pat knew that I kind of wanted to move to Vegas. And the fact that he had lived here for 35 years was a coincidence. Vegas to me was great weather, inexpensive, a place I could also work on shows and potentially make money.
There you go.
Because in New York,
positive.
Yeah, in New York, it's hard to make money producing shows.
Yeah.
So I thought, I can buy a little ranch house out there, which I did. But right around that time, it was 2017, Jerry Lewis died. And Jerry's wife, Sam, invited Pat to come out for the memorial out here in Vegas.
Okay.
And I think Pat at first was nervous. He's like, I can't go by myself. He didn't really trust anybody. He said, wait a second, Emily wants to move to Vegas. I think she can probably help me get out there for this.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
Yeah.
So we got on the plane. I said, of course I want to come to Jerry's,
There you go.
Memorial.
This is your
at
your
South
open
Point.
invitation. Yeah.
Right. And it was exciting. I said, well, it totally makes sense for us to go together. I'm going to help you. And, by that time, traveling by himself, he was in his late 80s.
Yeah.
But he really wanted to go, but he had at first turned them down. We ended up coming out here. We went to the thing. He got to connect with so many people. Marty Allen he saw again. Robin Leach, who he had done that show in the 80s with Robin Leach.
Yeah.
That was just before Robin Leach died, but there were just a bunch of people at that memorial who Pat got to see. He ran into Jack Jones, which was an interesting little quirky moment, but it was great. We had a really fun time. We bonded. And look, Pat was getting older, but he was sharp, very sharp and fun and a gentleman. So we just had a really, really great trip. And I said, I'm moving out here, And so we got...
You told him that.
Yeah, because I couldn't... Look, I love New York, but the 21 years was enough.
Yeah.
And I did everything I wanted to do there more than once.
Yeah.
So we came back to New York. To make a long story short, we ended up... I said, it's time for me to go. I bought this house. And he said, well, I have to go with you. And everyone thinks like I tried to coerce him into coming. I was like, if you want to come, come. He says, well, I'm going to get my own place and all this.
Yeah.
So we came out here, and one thing led to another. And I knew I wasn't going to leave this guy's side because he needed me.
Sure.
And he knew that. But he was also fun as hell.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
And he would make me laugh, and he was just such a special
You were comfortable.
person. Very comfortable.
Yeah. See, there you go. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
And safe. And that's one of the things I said at his memorial. I said, we made each other feel safe.
Yeah.
And I'm an old soul. He's a young soul.
Yeah.
And it worked. So when we came out here, we started reconnecting with all these people This was 2018. We actually packed him up on my birthday, May 20th, 2018. Packed up his apartment to move out here. But we began, Nelson Sardelli helped us, he and his wife.
Hey, Nelson. Shout out.
Nelson.
Yeah, we're so glad
Nelson and Lorraine, bless her heart.
Yeah. They're amazing, aren't they?
Yeah. So they helped me get out here and acclimate, to coming out here. But then, Pat loved going out every night. He wanted to go to dinner. And he didn't want to cook. He didn't want me to cook. He didn't want to mess up the kitchen. He wanted to go to breakfast every morning. So it was just like, it was a lot. Yeah. But we started running into all these people who he never would have seen again.
Right. It's like old home week, you get to see everybody,
Right, and this, Bob Anderson, Wayne Newton, Nelson. One night we were at the Italian American Club sitting over there, and it was full. It was just the funnest night, and there was all this energy, and somebody comes over to the table and says, Pat! And it was Frankie Avalon. And they hadn't seen each other, in forever. Yeah. And so it was really, and then Pat said, that young comedian Sebastian Maniscalco, I want to meet that. I want to go see his show. Yeah. So I was able to arrange it through some friends, and I believe the story goes that Sebastian's father, Sal, who's the sweetest man, found out Pat was going to be there, so he flew from Chicago to L.A.
Wow.
To fly with Sebastian to meet Pat. So we all got to be together, and they were so nice, and they treated Pat so well. And of course, and he was at the Encore. It was a sold-out room, and so Pat got to do that. But we got to really do. Engelbert, he got to see again. We would go to everybody's shows, and so he got some exciting times at the end. That's right. And we also avoided COVID in New York, which would have been horrible for him in that apartment.
Here. Yes. Yeah, much better.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Pat had a great 5 years. He was almost 94. He got sick, but he also was his body was breaking down. He was, and we did the best we could. We moved to Summerlin, had a house there, and then we moved to Las Ventanas, and we had a condo there, which was a really nice place for the end of his life. Right. And I liked being there, and I felt safe with him being there. But last year was Pat's 60th anniversary. Wow. Okay, 2023 of his very first show in Las Vegas, which was opening for Bobby Darin at the Flamingo. So I said to him, Pat, he said, 1963, my first show. Yeah. And what's funny, and another person, of course, who we got to be close to besides Pete Barbuti was Shecky. Yeah. And
he's amazing too, isn't he? They all are.
Yeah. Right. I mean, right. It's the era, it's the old era of comedy, and I've coined it the rubber chicken era, and that's another story. But like Sebastian Maniscalco probably does not have a rubber chicken in his closet like these guys did, right? But so I found a piece of the Flamingo in the Neon Museum one day when I was walking through there with Aaron Berger and part of the sign, and I said, what's it going to take to restore this for Pat's 60th anniversary, but also because there's no Flamingo sign piece that's lit up there. Yeah. So now it all has come to life, and I told Pat about it before he died, before he even got sick. I said, what do you think about this? He said, well, he wasn't into promoting himself in any way. He just wasn't. He was a very kind, generous person. Of course, he had his moments, and everybody knows Pat's personality, but he was a kind, giving person. But he said, look, if that's something you want to do, fine. Right. Well, it's coming to life now on May 19th.
Congratulations. We're going to have some information on that, so be sure and watch this. Okay.
Yeah, so we are going to light up this beautiful piece that they're putting together. Yeah. They're creating. Right there it is. They're recreating actually the what they have left of it, and we're gonna flip
You're
the
gonna light it
switch.
up?
Yeah, on May 19th.
Oh, wow.
Yes, but and you know, like Bobby Darin's saying, we're beginning to see the light.
Yeah.
It's coming. You know, so
So your dream is being realized.
yes, and
Yeah.
you know, I want to do everything I can to preserve Pat's legacy.
Oh, absolutely. Wonderful man.
Because he was a good guy, and
Yeah.
he was coined the angry comedian. Well, that was partially his shtick,
Yeah.
and he,
Yeah.
Pat was had the biggest heart of anybody I'd ever met, and he was a gentleman, and he overtipped, and he always was thinking of others. He taught me how to be more thoughtful of other people. He was a very special person. And I knew him for about 13 years. But those last 5 years that we got to be together all day, every day, have changed me as a person.
That had to, it has to be so hard for you.
It is, because
Yeah.
I wake up in the morning and especially avoid like that guy, and,
Yeah.
people have asked me, actually Ed Regine was the last one who asked me this. So let me just ask you, so was Pat like with you the way he was with other people? I said, no one was safe from Pat Cooper, and look, he had a tough childhood, he has a story, but everyone has their stories,
Yeah.
but it made him who he was,
Yeah.
and I'll, I'd do it all over again. And, he was not easy, but he loved me, and we loved each other. And like I said, we made each
Yeah.
other feel safe.
Yeah.
And he was, I'll tell you, Tom Cantone, who is the Mohegan Sun, he runs all the Mohegan
Yeah.
Sun properties, but he did Atlantic City, the Sands. He's been around forever, a booker. He coined it the best recently. He said, Emily, you had a ringside seat to the greatest show on earth. And
That's right.
even with the difficult moments and the difficult days, it was all worth it with
Yeah.
this man,
Yeah.
So
So what about you? You're going to do the Flamingo Ball, and then what is going to happen after that? Can you give us a little hint? Or
Well, I'm actually working with one of my very, very close friends. She's probably my best friend in New York, Laura Savini, who's the wife of Jimmy Webb, and she's worked with PBS for many years. And she's a producer. We're working on a PBS special, actually, about
wow.
Las Vegas. Because I'm very passionate about Las Vegas
Me
and the
too.
history of it.
Absolutely.
Because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And when I was in New York, leaving my hedge fund job, about to move here, in a Monday morning meeting with everyone in there, the CFO.
I wish I could have been a little mouse in there.
Well, I wasn't even thinking anything
Yeah.
of it because I'm,
Yeah.
But the CFO says, so one of our items on our announcement list is that Emily she's leaving the firm and she's moving to Las Vegas. And there were gasps in the room. Because Angelo Casaro was talking the other day about how 50 years ago when they moved here, nobody
Right.
knew people lived in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Right? Well, people still don't think people
Yeah.
live in Las Vegas.
No.
Now, I think they're starting to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because this place is really, even,
It's fabulous. Once you're here, you can go somewhere else, but you have to come back here because you miss it so much.
yeah, and there's so many things about it.
Yeah.
And look, it's not perfect. And
No.
when we moved here, I was not going to let him get behind the wheel. The drivers are crazy here.
That's right.
It's dangerous, and I'm a super hyper defensive driver.
Mm-hmm.
So we never had any problem, thank God. But and that kind of frustrated him because he was starting to lose control. And I mean, this guy, he was always in control.
Yeah.
And the phase that I had living with him and being with him was totally different than Patty, who he was married to for 41 years. I mean, that's a totally different thing, bless her heart. I'm sure, he was a handful, but I was able to handle him, and I figured out how to do it. And
That's the most important part, isn't it?
And no
Yeah.
relationships are perfect,
No.
but he was. It was all meant to be. He was the purpose, and I had never wanted to get married for two reasons. Divorce. I was afraid of divorce because
Right.
I saw my mother have two not very good marriages.
Right.
And then I was also afraid of being bored. And I knew with Pat, I wouldn't have either.
Never going to be bored on that.
Right?
No.
So, and I think about, the Pete Barbuti friends and Shecky, and the times I got to be with Shecky and Marie, his wife, they were so sweet to me after Pat died. And the loss of Shecky, the last day of the year was tough. Shecky was funny because there was one day I was having a particularly, Pat was having something triggered him and made him mad, something silly. And it was exhausting at times. And look, we fought back. I fought back. I could hold my own with the guy.
That's important.
But Shecky called. He's like, "Hey, what's going on over there?" And I said, "Well," and he would, of course, start out the conversation by singing a song. Because Shecky at the end was still singing rhyming songs off the top of his head. The guy was a genius.
Really? Right to the end?
To the end. And I will tell you, Pat's first night 60 years ago with Bobby Darin, he and his wife Patty, the night before, they went to see Shecky. And Pat said, he's told this story 50 times. He said, he told his wife Patty that night, "I'm quitting show business," because he was so intimidated by Shecky. Because Shecky was a genius.
Yeah.
He really was.
Yeah.
Pat was too, but Shecky was really something. And Pat, actually, the New York Times quoted him in Shecky's obituary saying, "I saw Shecky do 20 minutes hanging off of a curtain." The guy was just unbelievable.
He could just do whatever.
Yeah. And he was really...
He was comfortable.
He was comfortable.
Yeah.
So he calls this one day, and I said, "Shecky," he said, "What's going on over there?" After he sang a song and did all that. And I have some recordings of him doing that, which I love.
Yeah.
He said, I said, "Well, I'm actually having a bad day." And, Pat's like, I was kind of, like upset and flustered. "What do you think I should do?" I was like looking for him for advice because I'm thinking, one wacko to another, right? And I'm thinking he's going to give me some good advice. He says to me, now, I love Shecky. I was there till the end, and his wife is, they're like family, and they told me that. He says, "Well," and he would take a deep breath. He'd go, "Well, Emily, you just need to find a younger man."
You didn't expect him to say that, did you?
No.
He cracked you up there, didn't he?
Yeah, and I'm thinking, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, I feel very blessed. And on my 50th birthday, which was right smack in the middle of COVID, May 20th, 2020, I had taken Pat over to Henderson to get a cortisone shot that morning, and we had to be there at 7 a.m. And Marie said, "Well, if you are going to be over here, why don't you come over for breakfast?" So I spent my 50th birthday at Shecky's breakfast table, and she had a bagel there with a candle in it.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, and she took this picture of me sitting there between Pat and Shecky, and I thought, if things hadn't been so bad during the COVID time, I would have, done some fun disco party or something.
Yeah.
But I thought, what a memory of spending my 50th birthday with those two guys, you know, and Marie, and she's lovely, and her sister Joanne is lovely. They've just been so good to me. So I feel like it was all meant to be to come to Vegas for sure.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. You know what? I definitely want to have you back again because we have to continue this. But going forward, after this, you're going to New York, I believe?
Well, I'll be in New York in July because I've got some projects that I'm working on there. I've been talking to some of the Broadway producers. There's a show, Titanic, which is sort of a spoof of Titanic that's coming out here. It's an off-Broadway show, yeah.
When is it going to be here, do you know?
Well, we don't know exactly yet. I don't know the details. I want to, but I will tell you that Celine Dion is a part of it.
Oh, that's great.
But it's doing very well in New York, so it's a perfect show to bring out here. But we're also going to be doing some things in New York regarding Pat's legacy, which I'll share at a later time.
Yeah. Well, on the next show, you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super.
So I look forward to having you back.
Super.
That's our show for today. Tune in again. And thank you so much, Emily.
It was so nice to be here. I appreciate it.
Be sure to like, subscribe, and share Suzy's Las Vegas. Thank you.